Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of the Data Facing Track with CARC, the Campus Research Computing Consortium. Um, Today, we're going to do a recap of RDAP Summit that happened in March, which was most excellent. And since we probably have a few guests today, just a little bit about what CARC is. It's kind of a aspiring professional development group. We're actually looking to become a 501c3 here in the future. But it's all about kind of helping out research, computing, and data professionals just help with their career development and visibility and all that. And we have a number of different things here going on. We have the People Network, which is kind of like a virtual year-round conference complete with tracks. So this one's the data-facing track, all about things like data management, data analysis, all the care and feeding of data type things. But they're also working in interest groups around specific topics that are sometimes working on deliverables. And then we also have our operations group, which help with the operations of CARC, what it sounds like. Slide. Cool. And just a little bit more about the People Network. We have 5 different tracks, like conferences have tracks. We also have emerging centers, which is for smaller centers. Researcher facing, which is kind of focusing on training, outreach, kind of that like user engagement type activities. There's systems facing, which is all the people who maintain all these systems that researchers use for computing and data. And then there's strategy and policy facing, which is all about things like leadership, institutional alignment, and like creating programs. So if you are interested in joining our mailing list, so you get announcements about when things happen, that should be in the call doc. Cool. Right, and then Amy, I think, is gonna do an intro real quick.
Yeah, so just a brief introduction to RDAP, which stands for Research Data Access and Preservation. And I guess maybe to kind of highlight some of the differences between this organization and CARC, but also to think about the similarities and where our populations intersect. So we, in RDAP has been it started off as a conference. It was born out of ASIST and was just like a summit coming together and started to become a place where especially data librarians could gather together and talk about research data management from the perspective of helping support researchers write data management plans and think about infrastructure, policies, and resources, training, things like that. So that started out in about 2010, and RDAP really kind of grew as a community. I mean, I remember attending my first RDAP, which was in Minneapolis, and feeling like I had really found the people that do the work I do in a community. And so there was this growing desire to form a professional society. And so that work took place, started off maybe around 2017 and was finalized in 2019 when we did make the transition to a 501c3. Filled out a lot of paperwork. It was a little bit anxious, but we were able to do that. And so since then, we have grown quite a bit, somewhere almost 300 members, I think, and hoping to grow more. But at the conferences, we tend to focus on, the practical part through workshops, and Deb's going to highlight one of her workshops that she did today. And we also talk about policies, infrastructure in those workshops. We focus a bit on data science in the workshops, and that's usually how the conference starts. And then we get into presentations, research, and we tend to have either 1 or 2 keynotes. This year there were 2 keynotes. And I'm actually very glad that Ashley was able to come today. She was one of the conference organizers. And I think one of the amazing things that RDAP has done really well is even though when the pandemic struck, we went to virtual, we have really made it a welcoming and vibrant experience. I don't think any other virtual conference kind of succeeds the way we do. And Ashley, would you want to talk a little bit about the conference planning procedures and how that kind of comes together?
Yeah, so what's really great is that we so many of the conference planning committee tends to stay on. We have very little turnover, which is kind of great. So we have folks that have been doing this for 2021. Um, I think that's when I came onto the group, 2022. So we've done this for several years. And so what it is call for volunteers goes out in the spring after the summit, and we get folks, and then we start in the fall. Um, and we you, this year we didn't have to worry about it so much, but sometimes there's some decision on what conference hosting platform we want to use. Really creating that sense of community and having opportunities for engagement is it's challenging in an online conference. I mean, that is one thing I think we all miss with it in person. And so trying to find platforms that have that opportunity to like have like chat spaces, and then on top of that, creating social events so that you get a little bit, it's not the same, but to get a little bit of that. So looking to see what our options are, trying to keep the costs down because some are really expensive and some are more affordable. And then we kind of just sit down as a group and if kind of, bat around ideas of what we would like the theme to be. Generally, it's, you know, um, things that we're experiencing, as kind of as a group, any like maybe emerging themes that from like the past year that we've noticed. We also take in account feedback from our post-summit survey from the previous years. Sometimes that sparks an idea. And then from there, we kind of, we form our topic, and then we have all the kind of like announcements and everything are already done. And so we start sending those out, and we get so that's probably around September, and then October, November, we call for proposals. And then there's usually a mad rush right before the holidays to go through. I think we had what was it, 60 to 80 some odd proposals. Like we get a really good response rate, which is awesome. So it gets really difficult to pick that we have some like long conversations about should we choose this one over this one, merits, people, if they have one that they particularly like. And so we generally have that decided and we send out acceptance by December. And so we can all kind of go on break for the holiday season. And when we come back in January, that's when we kind of start planning in earnest, which is getting the schedule kind of nailed down. Starting in the fall, we've already been talking about keynotes. So we have the committee nominate folks that they think might be of interest or connect with the theme. And we got really lucky this year. We had two wonderful keynotes who I think really spoke to not only the theme, but I think the things that we've been thinking about and talking about as a community, both at our teams and institutions, and then larger as a profession. And then yeah, so get through the insanity that is January and February, and then in March we kick off, and then the week after, the co-chairs take a big sigh of relief that we made it, we got it through, and which would not happen without just the amazing volunteers on the committee, like hands down. It's the committee. Yeah, and then so we'll take a break. What's different about going into 2026 is that we were hoping and were originally planning to move back in person. So we knew that getting back in person was going to take a lot of additional planning because we had lost a lot of connections and resources with being online due to the pandemic. Um, Fortunately, things just keep rolling downhill faster. So, and and trying to be and understanding that so many folks are facing budget cuts, even more than usual, loss of funding, also the increasingly um, unsafe nature of just travel and being around for a lot of folks. We are going back online and virtual. So we've actually got we have a team already going, but we're probably going to put that on pause until July, and then we'll kick off and start again. And then maybe in 2027 we'll go back in person, but that's kind of the process. We're old hats at it by now. And so I know this year my co-chair Anthony was like, "Oh, I feel like we're like, are we missing something? Are we in like no, no, I think we've just got it so it's such an well-oiled machine um, at this point. But I'm glad that folks are really seeming to continue to enjoy it. I mean, regardless of, yeah, I think everyone kind of wishes for the in-person, but I think that allows a lot more accessibility, a lot more availability to folks. And yeah, just trying to keep it as social as you can over a Zoom window. So that's that's how we plan the RDAP. Nothing special, just a lot of kind of frantic works that somehow always culminate into a really good summit each year.
Well, I have to agree. It was very excellent. I mean, I didn't go last year, but the year before. It's just been a really amazing virtual experience. And I guess also since I've been in the community so long, I do recognize a lot of people that may contribute to my sense of connection. But hopefully for new folks coming in, you still have that. And the best way to get that bond is by joining RDAP and then participating in one of the action committees. Ali Kirsten is also here today. She's going to be she's the president-elect, right? And so we'll be taking on leadership in July and also did a presentation as well. So Ali, I don't know if you want to share something about being a leadership role in RDAP.
Sure. Well, I can say really briefly about membership. There's no better time to join RDAP than now if you're not already. And I'm about to send a sort of membership nudge to our RDAP Discuss list, which is not limited to membership. I believe anybody can be on RDAP Discuss. And so if you're on that list or you would like to join that list, be on the lookout for an invitation to join as a member this week, because as a member, yes, you get to be on action committees, which is how we, for example, put the conference on. But also you can vote for our executive board, and that's where I sit now as president-elect. Amy has been our past president. Are you the past president? Is
Yeah, I think I
you are
am.
now. But yes, Amy has been our president. And yeah, it's been an interesting, my onboarding to RDAP was a little bit newer just because I'm slightly newer in the profession. I became a data librarian in 2017, and I was fortunate to find RDAP rather quickly because I didn't know what I was doing. Right? It's like so many people who join the profession in an area that is not fleshed out yet. And of course, it's much more fleshed out now than it was in 2017. But RDAP was an amazing resource for me and probably how I met most of my contacts in the specialty. And what amazes me about RDAP is just so much knowledge that people have that ends up being helpful to other people in RDAP or also just at people's universities when RDAP members collaborate with their colleagues locally. And yeah, it's a supremely talented and people who are just really willing to give of their time and expertise. I'm continually impressed by that from everybody. Um, but I also believe that it's a community where it's very easy to come in and start making contributions right away, and everybody's grateful for that and happy about it. So we are growing, and I think that um, it was last year's summit, not the one that we just had, but 2024, where I think it was Tina Griffin and I'm blanking on the other people who ran the workshop, but it was essentially a reflection on how our profession was sort of a teenager now, and we were in those adolescent stages trying to figure ourselves out. We did have a workshop about that. It was very good. And I think that's where RDAP is as an organization now. And it sounds as though CARC also, confronting that process to become a 501(c) or C3 rather. It can be really tricky. And on execs right now, we're dealing with some of the things that arise when you're figuring out, okay, what will we be responsible for? What will we not be responsible for? How do we avoid sort of overburdening our volunteers, which we really try not to do. We want it to be something that people are able to do, recognizing that we all have jobs, we all have things that we need to accomplish. But I just can't say enough good things about RDAP. And yeah, I didn't have a presentation prepared necessarily, but I'm happy to take any questions people might have or discuss anything of interest.
Okay, well, I appreciate that and the willingness, like you said, to share. You're an example of that right now. And I think I mentioned at the beginning that, there's a lot of overlap in the CARC community and the RDAP community. The data facing track tends to be a place where a lot of us are in both places. And Deb is a good example of that. Started off as a CARC member, has joined RDAP recently and has done a lot of presentations. So maybe Deb, you want to talk about that kind of dual existence and also your presentations that you gave.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I come from more the IT side of things. But mostly I'm just out there talking to researchers, and while they do have troubles with like the actual analysis part, what I've found is that most of them have data storage and data management related problems much more than computational problems. And those are long-term problems. Like computational problems, you fix it and it's done and you get results. But like data management, that's a kind of continuous thing. So there's a really huge overlap. And I find that the groups at universities that can provide technology to handle research data tends to be in like an advanced research computing center that also has like your HPC systems, your supercomputers and all that. They already understand like technology needs for researchers, so they just go on and do things like provide active storage, provide an archive in the sense of inexpensive long-term storage. And so that's where I'm coming from whenever I talk about any of this. And this year, I think I formed a group of collaborators on a CARC list, actually, I think it was. We were interested in kind of evolving the 3-2-1 backup rule, if people are familiar with that. I've seen it in a lot of kind of data management 101 type materials, and it's very simplistic and could probably use some updating. So we made a workshop with the ambitious goal of creating kind of replacement teaching materials for that. And we documented all of this in an OSF repository that's also linked in the call notes if people are interested. And big surprise, we didn't actually create anything. We didn't get to that point. So if that's something people are interested in, we're still looking for people to follow up and actually kind of try to create some materials to replace this backup rule. And fun fact, what we learned in preparing for this workshop. So the origin of it is the DAM book, the Digital Asset Management book, written by a photographer. So like an independent freelance person. And this person's intent was never that if you're part of an organization, you probably need something different. This is for like independent people. So that was a fun discovery. Cool, and that's how our workshop went.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And again, this is like building those collaborations, right? Something I did want to mention, I didn't say in the beginning, was that the theme of the conference this year was evolutions in data services, forging resiliency. And I think that, you know, it was just a lot of foresight on the part of the planning committee to choose that title, because now we find ourselves, you know, in a time of data rescue again, which, you know, we're scrambling to preserve those very valuable resources for researchers. And I just think, you know, this is part of the work, and there was a couple of presentations on that work in RDAP this year. So I think now we're going to turn it over. I think Cameron is going to lead us in the open mic part of this. So if you were at RDAP and would like to talk about your experiences, you can like raise your hand, and then Cameron will facilitate people talking out.
So I can kick off by just sharing a little bit of one of the sessions I really enjoyed, which was the latter keynote, so the closing keynote. So just some of the reactions and some of the stuff I found interesting about it to kick us off. So that final keynote was Casey Feisler, who's an associate professor at UC Boulder in the College of Media, Communication, and Information. And dovetailing off of Amy's explanation of the theme this year, that talk focused on ethics as it relates to social media data, which was a really interesting conversation and something I've always found fascinating. But it was really wonderful to hear a deeper dive from an expert. So some of the things I just found really interesting about the talk Feisler gave is that the big point is that regulated human subjects research data is very straightforward for many of our institutions, but social media data sits in this grayer area that may or may not have better guidance depending on your institution. And there's a lot of ongoing ethical conversations about it. And discussions on social media data ethics at institutions have kind of historically been overlooked, though right now we're seeing a resurgence in conversations around web data because of AI consumption and crawling and training. But there's this idea around the publicness of social media data, but that's actually a fraught idea. And so some of the things Feisler talked about was Twitter is this original model organism for social media data, that a lot of understanding that we have comes from that. And they shared some work that's found, and I don't have the study quote. I did look for it. I didn't take enough pictures and the recordings aren't up, so I apologize that I'm going to give something they shared that I don't have the citation for. But they quoted a study that found that many of the Twitter users, and this was from 2018, didn't know research was being done from their data or in their tweets. And that many didn't even think researchers were permitted to do research without permissions, and that was untrue. And so there's this misunderstanding people have when they engage in social media, and how what they're putting out there is being used. And now, because of things with Twitter and APIs and also just changes in where people are using social media platforms, Reddit is now that massive source of social media data for a lot of researchers. And Feisler also quoted, I don't know if it was a study or just a review, but there was some work done that looked at around 700 papers that used Reddit as a data source, and less than 150 of them included any discussion on ethics around collecting that data. So something that Feisler was really trying to forefront in this is that data collection on these, really anywhere, but particularly on these platforms in this talk, should be context dependent, based on the community that the data is being collected from, and that needs to be the starting place, because there are a lot of ethical complications that come up. So Feisler left us with 5 questions that we should be thinking about when we collect data that I thought were really helpful. So to recap them, it's what are the norms and expectations of the people represented by this data? How could individuals or communities be harmed by this use and or dissemination of the data? who benefits from it? Are the people benefiting from it the same ones who face the potential harms? And what could you do to mitigate the potential for harm and or increase the likelihood of benefits? And Feisler raised that, if the big question is, can you answer all of these questions well enough to suggest that you are the right person to be doing the research or do the work? And I think that's a really interesting question and a really helpful framework that they left us with. So for me, I find this really interesting. I know at our institution, and this is really not on our what I'm about to say is not on our IRBs. They are a regular collaborator of mine. I think they're wonderful. I think they're under-resourced and they care a lot. So this is not about them. I think this is a general feeling I have, is that IRBs and ethical review boards do know and deal about these topics, but they don't know these really deeper niche areas that have different questions outside of regulations as well. And so I know at our institution, I often find researchers who wish they had more guidance around these things, and it's really left to teams to decide how to handle this. And so, I've always wished for more resources that we could dedicate to this at our institution, because it's just a complicated area, especially for us as US citizens. How does GDPR interact with what we're doing? How does terms of service relate to APIs? How, when we're collecting data, are we violating expectations of privacy, especially as literacies around technology change for our citizens and just people in the world? And so all of those ethical questions are really interesting to me. And that's kind of what I wanted to share from her talk and some of the summaries of what I took away. So yeah, we can keep going down that vein, or if someone else wants to raise their hand or unmute or share anything else they took away from RDAP.
Gonna throw out there too, if you have anything like negative to say, please feel free to share that too. You won't hurt my feelings. I don't know. Please don't let like RDAP, like me being like one of the organizers, detract from that.
Briefly, it looks like Deb asked how many folks were able to attend. Ashley, do you know off the top of your head? And then we'll get to
Around
Laura.
300, if I wasn't mistaken.
I mean of the folks here.
Oh, the folks here.
Maybe folks can throw in the chat if they were able to attend, and we can let Laura unmute and share. Laura, if you're talking, we're not hearing you.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
You hear me now? Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say, I joined RDAP when I was a new data curator, actually at USAID, about 4.5 years ago. And I found it very helpful, just for kind of, I guess, getting the lay of the land of the field. Being a data curator at USAID was my first data management kind of job, or data librarian job. And also learning about other opportunities. I'm now a research data management librarian at UVA, and I've gone to summits every year, but I didn't make it to this one for various reasons. But I have to say, it's not really anything negative, but I have not been as much involved in it, especially in my new job at UVA, because I've been more just kind of more involved with my work, trying to be more involved in other associations, but also I've done a lot of work with, or when I have time, with the Data Curation Network. I've been more pulled towards that than RDAP, but I do think RDAP is worthwhile. One thing I enjoyed but haven't done lately is I liked it when we would discuss a journal article once a month, in addition to the summit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It looks like we have quite a few people who may have attended that are sharing in the chat, and also some folks who also maybe gave some talks. So opening the floor if anyone who attended wants to share anything else, or maybe any of the folks who gave a talk want to share anything about their talks as well. And it looks like Journal Club's on hiatus, but hopefully may come back. Yeah, Allie.
Well, I'm happy to talk a little bit about my presentations, especially as they tie into larger themes that I picked up on at the conference. So I had a couple posters, but the one that I'm thinking of now was about our attempts to, and this was something I did with a colleague at a med school in Chicago, Rosalind Franklin University. We were looking at how to find institutional data sets, specifically public data sets. And anybody who's really tried to do this knows what an uphill battle it can be. And other talks at the summit touched on attempts to do this programmatically, or the reasons that it doesn't work out very well programmatically. Things like inconsistent labeling of affiliations, or in many cases, missing metadata. Anybody who knows who deals with a repository, certainly the data curation network touches on these things a lot, where you try to get all the metadata that you can from the depositors, but there are things that they don't include or that you wish you would have known at the time, and then you don't put them in later. And affiliation data is one of those things that is taking time to come along. And also, one of the other presenters who worked on this noted that Figshare was not particularly good about exposing and keeping consistent the affiliation related metadata. So no, it's not all sorted out because RORs exist. That's not where we are. So I like the fact that we have these issues that come out of multiple people's talks and presentations, and then we continue. Yeah, thanks, Deb, for putting roars in the chat in case people thought I was just talking about lions or something like that. I do mean the IDs for universities, etc. But having those discussions and pointing out things that sometimes we know, but it's helpful to hear other people say them, like, no, the problem of finding affiliated data sets and also still having linkages between data sets and the people and the publications and the other things that are attached to them. We really are still in the early stages of that. It's not a clean, functional, well-oiled machine. It's still got a lot of hiccups and bumps in the road. So I just love that kind of exchange.
I would like to say their kind of mascot is a lion, which is very funny.
And just to build on that, Ellie, I know for me, I love those conversations, and particularly when you're talking about as well, because it's hard at my institution to get other people to be like, yeah, persistent identifiers and how they relate and, how that's going to help us, because it's a hard image to sell to people who are not in this space. And so it's wonderful to have a community where we can talk about how to move those things forward and the problems around it. Yeah, Deb.
So I kind of want to go back to the keynote about data ethics, because that's been on my mind for a while. And it's actually really relevant to the CART community too, which does tend to skew towards HPC. There's this really cool software for HPC centers called XDMod that is basically a database of like all the data about supercomputer usage. And it's really powerful. It's got a nice interface where you can do like the click and point type of querying. But often different institutions and centers will have all that data available to the public. Like, I know the NSF funded supercomputers for the United States. It's called the Access Program. It's an acronym and it gets confusing, but their XD mod is public for all their infrastructure, which has always just kind of bothered me when people use it for research. And this keynote talk like put my finger on what was bothering me. It's like another quote from it is that when people kind of justify using these data sets, it's like the data is public. It's like, yeah, that's not really a good ethical argument.
Yeah, Allie's raising privacy washing or privacy laundering in the chat. Is there anything more you want to say on that, Allie?
It just goes along with what Deb was saying, where, just because, or saying that a third party released the data. So this is the other thing too. We have the public data and then we have a third party did it. So that's fine, right? I don't need an ethical clearance to use this data because the main sort of offender that made this famous was Facebook, of course. But it's been kind of I know people started to talk about it around the middle of the teens as a thing that, academic researchers partnering with corporate data sources or sometimes government data sources, but just there wasn't clear understanding that a research study was going on and that the people who had contributed this data were now, in a sense, research subjects. It just was all hand waved by a third party provided this data. And I continue to see it in publications now where it just doesn't seem as though, and of course with AI, it makes it even worse. Oh yeah, Deb made the point that it could even have been a malicious release. Like, well, the data's out there now, so now it's fine. And, there's not much you can do maybe in the private sector, but I think for academic researchers, we expect or hope that the universities are going to hold them to a higher standard, and it just doesn't necessarily happen. So that's all I was referring to.
No, thank you for building on that. I think that's great to have more context there. And something you said at the end that I think for me is something I always think about, and I think I maybe alluded to a little earlier, but burden. So I think a lot too, just about how much burden we all have and how under-resourced we all are. And doing these things well and engaging deeply in ethics means more training and more time before jumping into projects. And I think in the community notes I saw that Weissler was quoted as saying sometimes you need to do some research before you do research. And there's not always incentives or time to do that in the way things are currently constructed in universities. And so that's just something that's always on my mind as we talk about these things too, is how we make it possible for people to be better engaged in this. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think also building on Ali's comment about people understanding that they have become a research subject, one of the things that I've been trying to work on in my area is just reaching even younger audience in terms of teaching undergraduates about this and reading the fine print of these different services. There's that quote, I believe it's from The Social Dilemma: if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. And some of this is in those terms of use and getting the students to really look into those. And I think that RDAP also had some wonderful sessions on, teaching this to undergraduates. I think Kevin Reed had one this time around where they're talking about data management for undergraduates. And I think it's such an opportunity to engage with that particular audience. And I realize also maybe in advanced research computing, that may not be a target audience, but you may have an undergraduate who's working in a research project and you get an opportunity to work with them and really lay a foundation really early on. So I did appreciate, the conversations that are happening around that. And then also just how to get those people into the workshops, which has been a challenge, especially since the pandemic, that we are seeing the drop off of people attending in-person things. And so there was some conversation about that as well. So I really appreciated that particular session. I think there was a second session on undergraduates as well. So there were 2 sessions that I'm going to go back and review the community notes and all of that. Like, it's been pointed out that we do use the open science framework to disseminate this information about the conference. So even if you weren't able to attend, there are going to be recordings there. There are going to be like community notes. There'll be the actual presentations will be there. So you can go back and look at a lot of these resources from the conference.
I think they changed their name officially to just OSF, didn't they? Which is confusing.
Oh, is that like the KFC model?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really should be open scholarship framework or something like that. The science can be a little bit off-putting, but I'm not sure. I have to look into that. But yeah, people just say OSF, but
Yeah.
you didn't know what I meant, so I'm just saying it.
Yeah. But like, if people who aren't familiar with it go Googling it.
I know we're coming up on our time together, but we still have some time for any last thoughts, reflections, burning questions about RDAP for any of our representatives from RDAP today.
I will just note, so we have at NC State, we have a libraries fellow who I'm working with pretty closely on a 2-year project to sort of review and enhance our data management planning services through the libraries. And she gave a lightning talk presentation as a part of the conference. So RDAP presents this really nice opportunity for folks who are early career to kind of, in a lower stakes way, give a 5-minute, talk about what they're doing. It's a good way to kind of get your feet wet, to get yourself introduced to the community, I think, which is just reiterating something that folks made clear earlier in the call. But this was a nice kind of concrete example of how that can work within the RDAP framework. So really appreciated y'all giving her the time to do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we try to highlight like first time presenters and stuff because I think that is kind of, I think, in our whole kind of ethos of being like welcoming and just like sharing information. It's like everybody. So making sure that there's a good platform for them to feel comfortable. Yeah, like you said, low stakes, but to have like a receptive audience and to really kind of get their feet wet in it. So yeah. I think I was the Zoom moderator during that one because I'm like, that one's clicking.
Yeah, Allie.
The mention of the early career people also reminded me how many presentations we had at this summit and in previous summits too, but especially at this one, it struck me how many research data management, librarian academy, capstone projects. So there's this program that RDMLA puts on called Data Sciences Continuing Professional Education, DSCPE program. And I've been capstone mentor for a couple years now, and just many of the projects that came out of that got some kind of a presentation at the summit. So the RDAP Summit provides an opportunity for people that are in these professional improvement programs or these professional advancements that have a project associated with it to present at a conference. I think we have a good history of that.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I see it now. Yeah, sorry for the like really long name because I was involved in helping get that program like up and running. So I think Allie was one of the people that I like cold emailed and were like begging for capstone hosts at the first year. So really appreciate. But yeah, I noticed that there was a lot, and so it was really great to see that I sometimes question like if the content is still worthwhile to folks, but what I'm seeing is that the capstones are really like really beneficial and producing some really great content. So it was like really good to kind of see the evolution of that program. Um yeah, from kind of a scrappy like trying to get folks, but to really see and to see so many people like coming back as mentors is really great. And yeah, we had some really good presentations from DSAPE students this year. So that was really encouraging to see. And yeah, and if anybody wants any convo about that, I've helped with that. And yeah, definitely the capstone host can talk more about it. So but I'm glad it was a good experience. And yeah, I was really glad to see so many folks there. And
Yeah, so like this, for example, then if some institutions represented here needed a little help with their data services for a project or something, they could consider hosting a capstone project. Cool.
yeah, so I am no longer like with the I have since moved on. Um, but yeah, the Amy threw the link in there, but yeah, if you reach out to who is the program coordinator now? It was Perry, Miss Perry. Um, Kat, I think it is. And just let them know that you'd be willing to host the capstone. I know that that would not go unappreciated. Because yeah, usually the more capstones we have, like the more students we can let in, but also sometimes folks can't do for any number of reasons can't have to like skip a year in hosting a capstone, so that leaves a gap and that just helps make everyone's life a lot easier. That would be good. Yeah, yeah, just yeah, we can definitely reach out to just the team or even Wrong and Elaine. I'm sure they'll hit you up on it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm seeing folks start to drop off as we come close to the hour. So thank you all for joining today. And I hope you'll join me in thanking all of the folks who also attended to talk about RDAP today and share what they learned. Deb, Amy, any last things we should wrap up on or? Okay, cool. Well, thank you all.
Thanks
We'll
for
see you next
coming,
month.
everyone.
Thank
See you
you.
next month.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Yes, and thanks RDAP people.
Thank you, RDAP people.
Yeah, I'm glad I checked my spam.
Thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Bye.